For more than a century, a distinct Brazilian influence has permeated Lagos, Nigeria. Evident in the architecture and ancestral names.
Gomez.
De Souza.
Rodriguez.
Andre.
Martins. Valentine.
It's a history then and now centered on family.
There it is. Wow.
Food.
It's delicious.
And above all, faith. Today, that history is threatened. This is the story of Afro-Brazilians in Lagos, descendants of former slaves, fighting to preserve their cultural identity. This is Inside Africa. Mass at the Holy Cross Cathedral in Lagos. Just days before Easter celebration, a most sacred time for Christians. Many worshippers here trace their faith back to Brazil.
We're Catholics, so that's part of it. Brazilians are Catholics. So it's celebrating, apart from the culture, there's the religious aspect. When I was in church, I saw my second cousins, I saw my aunts, and the church is dominated by Afro-Brazilians, the Holy Cross Cathedral. So it's sort of a reunion for us.
A time for reunion and remembrance. From mother-daughter Elizabeth and Taiwo Joseph.
Okay, this is nice. This is, where is this?
Brazil.
I can see Daddy here. This is Brazil as well. I like what she's wearing, Oleko. What's happening here? Okay,
is this
Daddy,
me?
Yes, that's you. And Daddy.
The Josephs are one of thousands of families whose Nigerian ancestors were captured in the 19th century, shipped out to Brazil, then sold into slavery.
The Afro-Brazilian came in from my great-grandparents, from both sides, who were slaves. They were slaves that were carried away from West Africa to Brazil. So in the 20th century, with the abolition of slave trade, some Africans decided to stay in Brazil and some decided to come back home.
They called them returnees, and in the 1800s, they brought with them a blend of two worlds.
My grandparents were part of the people that came back home, and they came back home with their cultures. They all decided to settle in Nigeria, in Lagos Island, in an area called Brazilian Quarters. So that's the Nigerian and the Brazilian connection.
Also known by its Brazilian name, Popo Aguda. Today, that once bustling enclave is but a shadow of its former grandeur, a victim of decay and disinterest. And while her family has remained in the area, preserving the Afro-Brazilian legacy in daily life is not easy.
A lot of our Brazilian people from Brazilian descent are intermarrying. The children don't seem interested in knowing where they're from.
An immovable pillar in Afro-Brazilian life here is Waterhouse, built in the 1800s. A bit battered by time, but unbowed. Much like its matriarch, 89-year-old Angelica Yewande Oyediran, Madame Angelica.
Brazilian descendants are cooking and enjoying feijão. And we, grandchildren and offspring, have followed up the practice of our ancestors. And it is a pleasure, it is a delight. It is once a year that we have this special thing.
Feijão, a black bean dish prepared at Easter time in just about every Afro-Brazilian home, one of many foods brought across the Atlantic.
Like moqueca de piche, the fish stew is different. Arroidos, that is the sweet made with rice. Feijão de leite de coco with black beans and coconut milk. So many.
Her ancestral home also speaks to Afro-Brazilian culture.
Waterhouse, known as Casa d'Água, was built by my mother's grandfather, Jean Esson da Rocha.
Kidnapped into slavery as a boy, returning decades later, skilled in business.
Mother's grandfather was a wealthy merchant, sending some stuff from Nigeria and brought back textiles, shoes, and other things from Brazil.
The Da Rocha name is important in the community even today.
I am a proud Nigerian of Brazilian descent. God has saved our own ancestors, and we are what we are today. So it's a good heritage we have.
But heritage can be complicated. Graciano Oladepupo Martins also comes from a line of prominent Afro-Brazilians.
This is Martin Street, named after my grandfather.
Today, it's a street in the heart of the Lagos Balagon market. But more than 100 years ago, a different kind of commerce could be found here.
During the slave trade era, my great-great-grandfather was a merchant. When the slave catchers were coming all the way from the west, they used to stop at his compound because they knew he was a trader. So he now became a merchant, slave merchant as well. When they bring the slaves, some will stay here, and then the buyers will come to select. And all these places, there was nothing as at that time. All these houses were not in existence.
And as president of the Brazilian Descendants Union, he's often at the Popo Pavilion, a central meeting point for the community.
People like me and some other Brazilian descendants are around. We made it a point of duty that we should not all leave the community. If we should, there will be an infiltration of other people coming to destroy what our great-grandfathers built.
I'm just scared of my children not knowing where they're from, and our heritage is our identity.
Food is one way to keep that identity. And like Madame Angelica, Taiwo Joseph is preparing feijão. It's a family affair.
I learned the recipe from my mom. She got hers from her mom, and it's eaten by Catholics they use it to break their fast on Good Friday.
There it is, wow.
A lot of families now don't make it. Sometimes they hadn't made in 20 years. Some don't even know the recipes. Their mom passed away or their families passed away with the recipes. But they're from the same place I am from. So I don't want that to die out.
While culinary and religious traditions are alive and well in the Brazilian Quarter, the survival of Afro-Brazilian architecture is another matter entirely.
Sadly, it's gone. like it's been erased from our memory, from our environment.
Lagos, modern city of about 20 million, heartbeat of Nigerian commerce. In all that's new and shiny here, many Afro-Brazilians see their culture eroding. Many have moved away. Fewer eat the traditional foods. The most visible sign is in the fading architecture.
We're entering the core Brazilian area. This area, I would say, represents where the original returnees were. Sadly, most of the houses have gone, and they've been replaced by not so good buildings.
Peju Fatui is an architect and volunteer with Legacy, a non-profit working to save historic buildings in Lagos. Among them, iconic Afro-Brazilian structures, some going back to the 19th century.
You see the old, and then you see the new structure coming up, and that's how it goes. That's how they just vanish and disappear. Because they were all on this side, everywhere. They lined the streets.
The weathered bricks, fragile nails, decaying facades all speak to the passage of time, and all have a story to tell.
A picture freezes a moment in time. A building can freeze a time. In that way, the building embodies culture. It tells the stories of the people that lived in it. It tells the story of the people that built it.
Lumpkin House, which is today a bank. Doherty House are among the best remaining examples, crafted with the skilled hands from Afro-Brazilian returnees from slavery. Perhaps no home was grander than Madame Angelica's Waterhouse, so named because it boasted a well and the family sold water to the public.
This space contained Grandpa's bedroom and sitting room. The bedroom was from that wall to this second door.
She is speaking of her grandfather, Candido da Rocha.
When the Nigerian Brazilians returned into the country, they were the greatest artisans. They were of very, very good character, honest and dependable.
They were sort of the elite of the local society that time, and they were interested in moving Lagos forward, as they were, which is also testament to the fact that a lot of their generations still exist in Lagos, and a lot of them are still quite influential people.
Such is the story of Lanre Tauri Coca, proud Afro-Brazilian descendant, prominent Nigerian architect who grew up in the Campos district in the 50s. He's retracing his old steps, remembering his heritage.
Shows where I come from, shows my history. I studied architecture in the United Kingdom. I discovered that when I had to actually design residential buildings, I automatically went back to my roots. The shutters came into my domestic designs. The roofs were sloped. And I think it was something in my background, in my previous past, which made me come up with that kind of design.
Tauri Coker says he designed 10 modern buildings around Lagos, but honors his heritage in some of the details.
These are my trademark. All these I took from my origin in the Brazilian quarters in Lagos Island.
Perhaps most painful of all is what happened here.
Tinubu Square, maybe it was like Trafalgar Square. It was the center of Lagos Island, of the rich people, of the elite. And there was a building there that struggled to survive all through the years. That was Ilojo Bar. Ilojo Bar, from the name, was a bar. It was a social place. The fact that something was built over 100 years ago doesn't mean it is irrelevant or useless. It can still be made use of.
But sadly, the hand of time took its toll, and despite being recognized as a national monument, in 2016, Iloja Bar was demolished.
I think it's painful, it's very sad. I think it's a national loss because even the Brazilian embassy recognized the building and it testified to the fact that it was truly the Afro-Brazilian influence. It is just the epitome of what is happening in our society, how the old buildings are being destroyed, taken away.
If there is one home to defy the odds for another century, it may be Waterhouse on Kakawa Street, as resilient as its community.
I know by God's grace, nothing like that will happen here.
I have a particular case in my own family where our family compound, number 16 Catholic Mission Street, was demolished without my knowledge whilst I was away. And now on that piece of land is a fast food restaurant. I was mad. I was furious. But then my senior aunts, much older than me, their argument was, well, look, we don't have many more years left, so why don't we let it out and collect the money? I never thought they would demolish it. They could have preserved the building. If they liked it, they would have converted it, used it. You don't have to demolish it, but the whole damn thing was demolished.
This sense of loss is why Afro-Brazilians and their advocates are fighting to preserve what's left. But with loss, so comes hope and renewal. El Carnaval. Along the slave route in Badagry, Nigeria, is a haunting and symbolic marker, the point of no return. It speaks to the unspeakable. What might those captured likely felt? What might they have been thinking as they pushed away from the shore, separated from their home, no longer free? Years later, many of the survivors returned to Nigeria, arriving at the Lagos Marina.
They will bath at the mid-sea. The smaller boat will bring them down here, and they had their first Catholic Mass when they came on the other side of the road.
From humble worship to grand celebrations, preserving their culture is what's at stake for many Afro-Brazilians in Lagos.
My dear brothers and sisters in Christ, today is indeed the day that the Lord has made.
Father Marcelinas Deco is a priest at the Holy Cross Cathedral and is paying attention to some of the changes.
The number of Brazilian worshippers that we have here has reduced drastically, so we can't allow it to fade. We keep on looking for events and activities that we can organize to bring back this sense of belonging.
Belonging in song and praise. And in music and dance. Carnival gave their ancestors hope when they were slaves in Brazil. Today, it still inspires their descendants.
We're here to celebrate the Lagos Carnival. It's like the carnival in Brazil, the Rio de Janeiro Carnival. I am super excited to be here. It's one of the few cultures we still preserve. It reminds me of Brazil.
Rio de Janeiro's carnival dwarfs the Lagos Fanti Carnival, but the Brazilian spirit is here, just as strong despite the numbers.
We are telling them the history and the culture of interacting with each other as children from the Brazilian quarters. Today it's virtually empty, not like in the olden days. So all these cultures, they've just died down because nobody is interested again and the whole nation is busy one way or the other.
89-year-old Madame Angelica, who has seen countless changes in her lifetime, sees things differently.
Nothing really remains the same forever. But Brazilian architecture, Brazilian cuisine, they have not died out. They still remain in Nigerians of Brazilian descent.
Graciano Martins may have some of the deepest carnival roots. For more than 150 years, carnival participants have made elaborate costumes in this house bearing his family name.
My outfit is one of the outfits brought by our great-grandfather when they came. They brought all the foreign dresses. I'm seriously excited to be here to showcase my cultural heritage and to tell people that yes, my great-grandparents came with all vigor to tell them that we are Brazilian.
It's not all gloom and doom. It depends on the government. It also depends on the community. We have to appeal to the state government. Look, we have a history which we need to preserve.
For Taiwo Joseph, that means picking up the baton from her mother.
She's taught me Portuguese. She's taught me recipes, foods from the Brazilian quarters. So yeah, she's been a large part of it. So now she's handed over the mantle to me.
It remains to be seen how the Afro-Brazilians in Lagos can re-energize and grow their culture for the next generation.
They were our people that had come back home. They were viewed like people that traveled, that went on a journey and came back home. They are Nigerians, they are Lagosians. So it's not a fight for just the Afro-Brazilian as it were, but it is a fight for our own joint history, our own culture.